Mr. President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as a supreme being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the President. Bills brought from the House of Representatives. Petitions, papers.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of Public Administration. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Administration to the 11th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the administration and expenditure of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication.
Reports from committees, urgent questions.
Senator Mark.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. To the Honorable Minister of Education. Having regard to recent reports of government's non-payment of full tuition and other fees for additional scholars studying in Jamaica, can the Minister indicate when will said payments be made?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I am not aware that government has decided not to pay full tuition and other fees for additional scholarship winners who are studying in Jamaica. I am not aware of that. Madam Speaker, what I am aware of is that Cabinet has decided that with effect from September 2018, recipients of national additional scholarships who are desirous of pursuing studies at the Mona or Cave Hill campuses of the University of the West Indies will be paid full tuition and compulsory fees applicable to the respective campus, as well as other allowances to which additional national scholarships winners are normally entitled, only if such scholars can provide evidence that they applied to the St. Augustine campus and did not gain admission, or where such scholars are guaranteed a place at the St. Augustine campus, or such scholars obtain a deferral for 1 academic year and, however, opt to study at Mona or Cave Hill campuses of the University of the West Indies, they should be eligible for the payment of the tuition and compulsory fees applicable to the St. Augustine campus. Thank you very much.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, can the Honorable Minister indicate when will these tuition fees and other allowances be paid to those students who have received additional scholarships?
Senator Mark, try and rephrase that question in light of the answer that was given by the minister. I'll allow you to just refine what you're asking a little bit.
Yeah. Madam President, in light of what the minister has said, I'm simply asking whether those students who have enjoyed additional scholarships and are studying at Mona, in particular, can the minister share with us, since they are entitled to their full tuition, can the minister share with us, have these tuition fees being met by the government of Trinidad and Tobago?
Minister of Education.
Madam President, Senator Mark is again confusing the issue, and he's arguing from the wrong premise. Senator Mark started off by saying and by questioning that those students have not been paid. And his definite question was, why have they not been paid? Now he has veered to the other side, asking when will they be paid? And these are some of the things I don't understand with the goodly senator. He has to be more specific. But in deference to him, Madam President, I will answer. There are about 7 such students whose parents are making a bid through the public media, through letters to the minister, to have that situation change. In the meanwhile, they have not accepted the additional scholarship. Because if they do that, then they'll have to fall right into the category where only their tuition fees will be paid that is applicable to that which has been paid at St. Augustine. Thank you very much.
Senator Ma?
Yes.
Senator Amin?
Yes. And just a clarification, Madam President. And the minister indicated the requirement for students to apply to UE and show evidence that to UE St. Augustine and show evidence that they were not accepted there, if that is a new policy.
Minister.
Thank you very much. That is not a new policy. That policy was in existence since 2002, and it was revised in 2013. Simply, it states that once you are in receipt of an acceptance to the St. Augustine campus, whether that acceptance has been deferred by 1 year or not, you have an entitlement. However, it is up to you to choose whether you're going to accept those conditions or not. Those students, through their parents, have not accepted those conditions, and therefore they opted to study in Jamaica. Thank you.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, the government will be answering question number 46, and we seek a deferral of 44 and 45 for 2 weeks.
Questions number 44 and 45 are deferred for 2 weeks, Minister? Two weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks. Senator Mark.
Question number 46 to the Honorable Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Allow me to begin by stating that salary negotiations that affect terms and conditions of service of teachers, members of the teaching profession, do not fall within the remit of the Ministry of Education. That is the business of the Chief Personnel Officer, who gets instructions from the Minister of Finance. However, Madam President, wage negotiations have commenced between the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association and the Chief Personnel Officer, according to information that we have received. And I've been very clear, according to information that we have received, because we are not engaged in those discussions. However, Madam President, the government of Trinidad and Tobago remains committed to the collective bargaining process once consideration on tutors' wage proposals have been completed by the Chief Personnel Officer and the counter proposals are developed. In the event that negotiations are not commenced and industrial action is taken, the Ministry of Education will utilize existing protocols led by the school administration at affected schools to ensure that all our students are adequately tutored. Thank you very much.
Senator Mark.
Can the Honourable Minister indicate how far, from his knowledge, negotiations has reached between the parties with a view to arriving at a new collective agreement?
Minister.
Madam President, it is difficult sometimes for me to understand Senator Mark's thinking. I just said those negotiations do not fall within the remit of the Ministry of Education. The responsibility for those negotiations lies solely and squarely with the Chief Personnel Officer, who is directed by the Ministry of Finance. And therefore, to ask me how far the negotiations have reached, I can't answer that question. Senator Mark, being a former trade unionist, should be well aware of that procedure. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, would the Honourable Minister want us to defer asking any further questions to him and maybe direct our questions to the Minister of Finance instead? Would you prefer that?
Senator Mark. I think you're asking the Minister a question through me, and that question does not arise.
Yeah. Could the Honourable Minister indicate when he mentioned that the Ministry will put in place the relevant and necessary protocols to ensure that education runs smoothly and not disrupted? Could you elaborate for the Senate, please?
No, Senator Mark, I won't allow.
No, he did raise that.
He did, but I don't think that question is relevant to the original question that you asked.
I thought it was arising from what he said.
Yes, and from
so can I go outside of that?
You can ask. You have one more question that you can ask.
Can I ask the Honourable Minister whether, from his knowledge, he expects that negotiations between the parties, which is critical, to be consumed and concluded within the time frame allotted under the collective bargaining process? Can the Honourable Minister share with us his thinking and knowledge on this matter? Because you're not fully involved, but you may have a little knowledge of it.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Senator Mark is asking me to predict. I don't have a crystal ball where I can predict accurately. I can't. And secondly, Madam President, I've been saying all the time this evening that I do not have a handle on negotiations. However, if the situation arises where the Ministry of Education has to take or has to put things in place to ensure that our students are adequately served in the school, we certainly will do that. Thank you.
Madam President, may I inquire question number 49 on the order paper, which was due on the 30th of the 11th, 2018. Could you give us an update as to where we are on this matter?
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, it is my understanding that the Minister of Public Administration is awaiting on a legal opinion as to whether this information could be made available.
And you would realize that was a similar answer we got just about a year ago. And I cannot understand, Madam President, through you, how a legal opinion could take that length of time. And Madam President, may I just engage you for 1 second to let you know a similar question was posed by the PNM in opposition, and they were given a big bundle in response. So I don't understand, Madam President, why this is taking too long. A whole year, Madam President.
Senator Mark, you are aware that as the presiding officer, I have no control over the answers. We have followed through on the process, and I believe that you were furnished with a copy of the information received from the Minister of Public Administration. Am I right?
No, not in this session now.
All right, well, I will clarify that, and at the next sitting, or even before, I will have a chat with you about it.
Public business, private members' business motions.
Honourable Senators, the debate on the following motion, which was in progress when the Senate adjourned on Tuesday, November the 27th, 2018, will be resumed. Whereas the Board of Petrotrin announced on August the 28th, 2018, that the company's refinery will cease its crude oil refining operations, and whereas the Prime Minister on September the 2nd, 2018, confirmed that the Cabinet had accepted a recommendation of the Petrotrin Board to close its refinery, and whereas it is evident that the decision of the government was without stakeholder consultation and with little or no disclosure to the public, and whereas the decision to close the Petrotrin Refinery will have direct adverse consequences on thousands of persons as well as on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, be it resolved that the Senate take note of the failure of the government to disclose a viable and credible plan to address the needs of those persons or businesses affected by the closure of the refinery, and be it further resolved that the Senate condemn the actions of the government in closing the Petrotrin Refinery. On the said Tuesday, the 27th of November 2018, there were 7 speakers, including the mover of the motion. Senator Thompson-Ahye, I now call on you to resume your presentation.
Thank you, Madam President. The flare that once burned bright, lighting up the Point-a-Pier night, signifying the Petrotrin Refinery was near, extinguished, a beacon of hope replaced by despair. The Ramdeen motion states in part that the decision to close the Petrotrin Refinery will have a direct adverse consequences on thousands of persons, as well as the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Who are these persons, and what are the adverse consequences? The former U.S. Vice President Hubert Humphrey states, "The moral test of government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped." And all of these groups are impacted by the decision to close Petrotrin. Within these groups, we have different subgroups. We have the permanent Petrotrin workers. We have the temporary workers, and we have the retirees. And all of these workers are impacted by the decision to close Petrotrin. Within the elderly group, we have parents, grandparents, and other dependents. We have the sick, and even those who are handicapped. One worker may be dealing with multiple groups of dependents. We cannot assume that the elderly have finished their mortgages. We cannot assume that they don't have children, because there are elderly people who have quite young children. We have heard time and time again, follow the money. And sometimes people take that quite seriously, especially women, and they follow the money by going with men who they think have money, and hoping for a better life. And sometimes there are multiple wives, multiple families arising out of this situation. And you have, of course, a multiplicity of children. So sometimes one person may be dealing with several homes, and they have to provide for these homes. So we have also lots of what we call help children. And, you know, I always try to educate my clients, but sometimes my clients educate me, and I'm always grateful. Because I was doing a divorce, and the woman came to check with me the petition we were going through, and she had in tow a young child. And I said to her, "You're babysitting?" She said, "No, that's my child." I looked at the petition. It was nowhere there in the list of children. And I said, "But how could this be?" She said, "It's not my husband's child. That is help." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I went to get help, and I get this child." So I learned about help children. And I just want to advise that this is something that is very real in the society. Because in many societies, people believe that parliamentarians who they have voted for, they must seek help from them. And sometimes children come out of that help situation. And there are concrete examples, which I will not reveal today. So we have the immediate consequence of the economic deprivation, and these groups of children and wives will be impacted differently. I spoke on the last occasion of the general comment of the United Nations Child Rights Committee, number 16, General Comment 2013, entitled "The State Obligation Regarding the Impact of the Business Sector on Children's Rights." Now, children are right holders, and they are stakeholders in businesses. They are future employees. And I was talking to a senior person at Petrotrin recently, and she said to me, "You know, one of the elderly workers said, I was looking forward to my child coming to join us at Petrotrin. And as I, you know, came and joined my father, and now that is something out of the question." Do forgive me, Madam President, but I meant very early to say that I have a very personal interest in this issue. Very personal interest. So when I speak about the retirees, I have a retiree in my house. I attended the funeral of a retiree yesterday, my brother-in-law. And many times I cook in a Petrotrin pot, because when the 35th anniversary came around, 35th award ceremony, I get a list, and I was told, "What do you want?" Sometimes I may choose a jewelry, a pendant with a diamond. Well, the thief took that. But I still have my pot, so I cook in a Petrotrin pot because I am married to a retiree. And I've gone through the whole list, Texaco, Petrotrin, whatever, and my brother-in-law was Trinma, and I heard the Petrotrin people talking yesterday glowingly about him. And he was handling the payroll, a very calm accountant. And he retired 2 years ago, so he's not in that. So we talk a lot about they benefited from Petrotrin, and the people are well paid. So I know a little about what they speak, a little. And because I understand the difference between planned retirement and retirement that is foisted upon you, I can feel for those workers. Because when it is planned, and we opted for planned voluntary retirement, there were programs. There were lectures, there was counseling, and the experts said things like, you know, if you go home, your wife will be fed up of having you in the house whole day because you will no longer be working. Of course, they don't understand all wives are not the same, and some wives like me can always find things for somebody to do once they're in the house. Not all. All right. So we have a situation where you have a number of things that are happening with adults and with children. And I spoke about abuse of children as a factor that may arise out of the loss of employment, the loss of that sense of manhood, and the frustration. And so that you have the physical abuse, and you also have the verbal abuse. And we don't, some of us are old enough to remember a calypso called Child Training by the mighty composer recently deceased. And he said, here was the mother talking to the child. Your father ain't give me an X cent. Tomorrow I have to pay the X rent. So here is a child. The parent is unable to provide the father, and the child is being abused because of something that the child has no control. So you're going to have the verbal abuse. I spoke also about domestic violence, or sometimes called intimate partner violence, and the impact on the spouses. And sometimes people think that is very remote, and it is not real, because men don't automatically lose jobs and begin to beat their wives. I would be the last one to say that that is the cause, because I understand that domestic violence, and this is what I teach my students, is a power and control issue. But you have various triggers. And one of the triggers may be that loss of the sense of control over your financial resources, the loss of the breadwinner role. And there have been studies, for example, one came out of the Barcelona School of Economics in April 27 in a paper on employment and intimate partner violence, a gender identity approach, written by Anna Pratt. And she showed in her study the causes and effects of unemployment on intimate partner violence. And she said it was important to study these things, to study the cultural values and the gender-related problems that explain the cultural and economic behavioral outcomes. So if we know exactly what is happening and we know what is to come, we know how to provide. So what is happening in terms of the employee program at Petrotrin? How is the Ministry of the Prime Minister's Office and Gender and Child Affairs catering for that fallout of domestic violence problems? Is there anything we're putting in place? Or is it that the Petrotrin place that up at Richmond Street there, near to me, if it is still functioning with the same degree of input from the now defunct, who's taking it up, the now defunct company. So all of these things one has to look at, because we need to design policies based on the research of what can happen and may very well happen. Studies also coming out from Canada talk about a decrease in female unemployment and the challenges in male employment. So sometimes it works, and there's also an English study that said, you know, it is not always that the women become the breadwinners and the men are going to take advantage of them, because we know in the society sometimes the woman can't control her own resources, you know. You know, the man would take the money from her or may not want her to work. But in some instances, the man, seeing the woman working, has a different mindset. And he becomes more pliant, more obedient, because he knows he can be put out of the house. All right? Because she's the one with the resources. So it depends a lot on the society, the values of the society, the whole, how much patriarchy is entrenched. Because we know that in spite of when we look around, we see so many women who are permanent secretaries, and we say, well, women are moving up. Women are moving up in the world. We are doing very well. But sometimes very powerful women inside of the offices are not powerful in their homes. The same thing for men. Sometimes men are very powerful outside in the office, and at home, they're never powerful. Thank you very much, Mr. Beaker. Confession is good for the soul. So we have a number of situations that can arise out of the situation at Petrotrin. But as I said before, the question of the retirees is one that has engaged a number of people in society, and especially the question of the health issues. Now, I saw an advertisement on, in the newspaper from the credit union saying, come and join up. So one day you see an advertisement saying, come and join the credit union. Another day you see another advertisement saying, come to the company and sign up. If your surname begins with A or your surname begins with B. So it's a lot of confusion at times as to what is happening, what to do, where to go. Now, the question of the uncertainty about the health issues is something that is very, very important. Because you have patients who have to get dialysis treatment as a regular feature, who have had heart problems, and they're accustomed going to the clinic periodically so that they can have their needs attended to, their medical needs. And it wasn't only a question of going for a health checkup, you know. It was a question where these persons who used to work together for many years, sometimes over 35 years, 40 years, and they had a way of bonding together. So the boys, they call them boys, even though they are over 60, they would meet and they would talk about their grandchildren. They would talk about their wives. They would talk about what are you doing with yourself. And it was a way of camaraderie. So you know, we hear about, you know, Sukras has another grandchild. And, you know, Ramsing's child just got out of university. So all of these things. And when you have elderly people who are able to talk with other people, it really helps with the quality of their lives. Because a lot of people grow old, and that loneliness, not having friends to talk to, really shortens their life. So that was a way, when they met at the health clinic and they exchanged notes, that was a way of bonding together and improving their quality of life. Insofar as the children are concerned, we talk about children who are disabled. And there was actually, I understand, a school on the compound. So you didn't only have St. Peter's for the children of the, formerly of the expat, but you had children who had special needs, and they were catered for. What has happened to that school now on the compound? I understand there was a pool, because I spoke to somebody who was recently retired, and she was telling me there was a pool that people could have gone and bathed in that pool. There was a golf course which catered for everybody, and they say it's not like in Port of Spain where certain people go to the golf course. Anybody could have gone to Petrotrin. I don't know. I didn't live there. But so there were many benefits that are being lost, and you know, impacting the quality of life of the various people who have suffered by the closure of Petrotrin. And it's what I hear from the people with whom I speak, because I speak to different professionals, is that it is not just the closure, the fact of it, because they saw that something would happen. They had heard that something would happen, but it was the suddenness of it. When you have a rug pulled from under you, or you're going to sit comfortably in a chair and somebody removes that chair, you have damage, potential damage to your coccyx. But when it is something like that happened, the suddenness of the closure, it hurts your heart, because you don't know what is happening, when it's happening. So you really needed more information and more consultation to try your best to stave off the economic loss and to prepare for the loss of your job from Petrotrin. So in terms of the economics, the cultural, because we've heard that Even the steel band is no longer going to be sponsored. So we have all of these groups that are impacted by the loss of the Petrotrin factor. Now, sometimes the words don't come out right, the song says. The words don't come out right. And what is intended is not what is received. So when you are told that we have to consider not just the few in Petrotrin, but also the entire society, the message can be received that just me, I'm just one person, I'm just two, I'm just a few, I'm not important. And then people think back about when election time is coming around, and we get a different message, that every single vote is important. And some of us may remember when Mr. Manning's political life hung in the balance, was hanging in the balance on one or two votes. So it was very important. Every single vote is important. And if every single vote is important, then I want, I would expect as a person that I would be considered and my needs would be considered. Now, I have seen, so perhaps it is a good thing that we had a hiatus, a softening of the approach, and we're hearing about things that are being put in place, houses and land for ex-Petrotrin workers. So whereas we can say there is perhaps a little shining light at the end of the tunnel, there might be something on the horizon. We don't expect that flare to go up in a hurry. Coming back from the wake the other night, there was darkness, so it was very different and eerie. So we don't know Pointe-à-Pierre as we knew it before. And in fact, it is going to take some time for people to come to terms to living a new way and preparing to live a life. And it's not a life of luxury, as so many people believe, because we talk about good salaries and so on. We talk about all the overtime when the cat cracker unit is down and people are making money, but nobody talks about the risk. How many people would know a colleague, a compere, who is with you, and next thing you know, there's an explosion of a compressor, and he becomes a fiery being, and then he is no more. Nobody talks about the risk. They talk only about the salary. So that once you are in the refinery, there is always a risk involved. We do not know when a worker goes out to work in the morning if that worker will return at night, because anything can happen. And I know it is not only in one industry, it can happen in other industries. But we know about waiting and hoping and not being able to sleep, and then hearing the next morning, bring pajamas to Augusta's lawn. So it is a situation where people have sacrificed, have suffered risk to bring a benefit to the society, and nobody at any point has said to them, thank you. Thank you for what you have done. Thank you for the risk that you have suffered. And some of these things are long-term. Who has done a study about the health risk, the permanent health challenges suffered by these workers? Do we know? Do we know what risk, what attendant ills have been passed on to children, or what they suffer in themselves? So there have been consequential damage, and people have suffered. And it has been a sad day for many people. Some people were fortunate, as I said, and were out of the company before. Some people were hoping to get in and will no longer be able to get in. So that succession plan is no longer viable. And the quality of life for many people will no longer be the same. Everybody can get a job. Everybody can be an entrepreneur. We have to be creative. And perhaps this is an opportunity for people who are business leaders. And I see the move of the motion being very interested, perhaps sharing the wealth with other people who are less fortunate. Try to see what we can do for the children. Try to see what we can do for those people who are going to suffer the fallout of this situation that has occurred. So it has been a very traumatic time for many. We are hoping that everything will be resolved. We are hoping that all the consequences will be understood, and that at the end of the day, we will still have some hope return in society. So we will have patience, but we're asking that we do not wait too long, and that there be compassion and understanding for people who are not readily thought of as the victims of this situation. And I thank you.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President, for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this debate. Madam President, I am a proud member of San Fernando. So I grew up with the pride and hope that was propelled by the existence of Texaco first, followed by Petrotrin. I have family who worked at Petrotrin. I have a brother who was in charge of the cat cracker and was the one who they called out when there was a problem, and he actually was injured in an accident, a blow-up at the cat cracker years ago. So I am personally aware of all of the issues that would have been raised during the presentation of Senator Thompson-Ahye. And I can tell you, based on my personal experience, it is not that we are not aware of the issues. It is not that we are not caring of the issues or concerned about the employees. It is that we were faced with a very tough decision that had to be made. And what we tried to do was implement the decision that was made in a way that would not be too traumatic on each of the employees. So to remind you of what we faced in making that decision that led us to the place where we are, let me take you back to some of the basic facts. There was a decline in crude oil prices. Crude oil prices within recent times reached a high of $108 a barrel in 2014, went down to a low of $26 a barrel in 2016. We had a resulting collapse in petroleum revenues from the petroleum sector, which reached a high of $19 billion in 2014 and a low of $1.5 billion in 2016, aggravated by the combination of generous tax incentives on the one hand and a significant drop in production on the other. We had a petroleum sector that in 2014 contributed 30% of our total national revenue, and by 2016 contributed only 2.3% of that revenue. That is the scenario with which we were faced. In respect to Petrotrin in particular, there were two major problems that created the economic circumstances for that company. And those two major problems were there was no exploration for oil and very little focus on that part, on the exploration and production part of the business. All the focus was put on the refinery, including all the finances and investment, but notwithstanding that, the refinery continued to be a loss-making entity. So those were the two major issues faced by Petrotrin. As a result of that combination of issues, what we had was indebtedness created in the business of Petrotrin of $12 billion. Petrotrin owes $12 billion in respect of its two major debts. Almost half of that is due in August 2019. If you look at the profile of the company, there was little prospect of the company being able to settle that debt. I would say no prospect of the company being able to settle that debt without state support. And as you would have concluded from the discussions we have been having in the Senate, the state is itself in a situation where it is seeking to recover from the downturn that has occurred in the economy over the last couple of years. So we are now crawling out of that hole, and to take on Petrotrin's debt in this scenario would have been a significant burden on the state, and we were advised that non-settlement of the debt would not only negatively impact Petrotrin, but it would very likely lead to a downgrade of Trinidad and Tobago's ratings with the international lending agencies, which would have increased our borrowing cost. Petrotrin had $19 billion in cost overruns. It had a wage bill of $2.2 billion a year. It had a medical plan that cost $245 million a year. It required to operate the refinery 100 barrels of oil a day, but only produced itself 40,000 of that $100,000. And for every barrel of oil that it needed in excess of what was produced locally, it had to import that, and it incurred a loss. So the average loss of that company in respect of those purchases was $3 million a day. So for the years 2014 to 2017, the company incurred losses. Even when the price of oil was at its peak of $108 a barrel in 2014, the company produced a loss of $201.3 million. It had unpaid taxes and royalties of $3.5 billion. Not only did it not pay to the state the royalties that was due from its own exploration activity, even royalties collected from sublessees that were paid by sublessees were not remitted to the state because the money was used for Petrotrin's day-to-day operations. If it was to continue, it needed to upgrade the refinery because the quality of the refined product would not have been saleable in a couple of years. So it would have needed a minimum of $7 billion to upgrade the refinery to produce a product that could have been sold on the international market, or it would have lost its market. There was little to no investment in infrastructure. So we have an aging plant, an aging supporting infrastructure, and there's evidence of that in the oil spills that have been experienced, and we have been very fortunate that those oil spills have not been more problematic and more widespread and more damaging than they have been. So Petrotrin was operating on a business model that was obsolete and uncompetitive and unsustainable. To continue to operate Petrotrin in the state that it was in, would have required a cash injection estimated to be $25 billion. That is half of the national budget as reduced under this administration. And despite the injection of $25,000, we were advised by the persons who looked at the projections that even if we had contributed the $25 billion to shore up Petrotrin to get it back to a state where it could operate, it would continue to lose $2 billion a year. This is what we were advised. So what we had was an industry that was severely crippled and could only be sustained by either significant state support, which the state could not afford, or it required restructuring. So those were the facts that faced the government from the time it came into office. It undertook an exercise to review the operations of Petrotrin and to determine what were the viable options. Lots of people have said that there was no warning that anything was going to happen, but I will remind my colleagues in this House and the national community that the Prime Minister would have raised these issues as early as January of 2017 when he made an address to the nation on this issue and indicated that we had serious concerns about Petrotrin and its operations and its future, and we were going to look to see what could be done to put the country in a state where it would no longer be burdened by this thing that is Petrotrin. I think that as Trinidadians, what we tend to do is not accept the inevitable until it becomes absolutely inevitable. So the people who say they had no warning may possibly have been in that position. They thought it was just talk and we would not have acted, but we did not have a choice but to act. So having done the reviews, having got the advice, having taken all the options into consideration, it was decided that we had no choice but to stop operating this loss maker that is the refinery. Because without the significant injection of funds, which we did not have, the refinery just could not be sustainable. We decided, that was the first decision. We decided, secondly, that rather than importing petroleum to refine at a loss, we would increase and improve our exploration and production focus to improve the output of crude oil, and we would sell that to foreign locations and earn foreign exchange rather than expending foreign exchange on the purchase and importation of crude oil. We would, and since we were no longer going to be refining crude oil, we would import the crude oil, the petroleum products that we required for local consumption. So we would move from a situation where we were importing 100,000 barrels a day to manufacture refined product, and we would instead import 25,000 barrels a day to satisfy local needs. We would try to increase our production from 40,000 barrels a day to perhaps 60,000 or even more, and export that and earn foreign exchange, giving us a net foreign exchange benefit. So when we looked at that configuration, the company was comfortable, having looked at all the figures and done their projections, that we could turn Petrotrin from the loss maker and drain that it was into a profitable company that could benefit not only the region in which it operates, but also the whole country. I said I was a proud Southerner, and when I lived in South San Fernando, it was booming, it was bright, it was growing, it was developing. In the last couple of years, when I've driven out to San Fernando, I have been distressed by the fact that San Fernando seems to me to be turning into more and more of a shanty town, because there is no growth, there is no development. You're not seeing the prosperity that the old Texaco and Petrotrin brought at the time. So that to me was a reflection of what was happening with the company that was the leading industry in the area. And it needs an injection if San Fernando itself is to survive and to continue to grow as it was in the past. So those were the decisions that were taken. And as I said, it was not taken in a callous way. We appreciated that employees would have been impacted, and what we tried to do was soften the blow for those employees and create other opportunities. So let us look at the decisions that we have taken and the steps that we have taken to ease the burden on the employees that have been impacted. We have been advised that the companies in total employed 3,400 permanent employees and 1,500 temporary and casual employees. As we would have seen from the closure of ArcelorMittal, there is a clear position in the legislation that on the closure of a company, severance payments are not due because it is not seen as a redundancy. But we did not seek to rely on that because we wanted to provide support to the employees. So what we did was we agreed to pay termination packages not only to the permanent people, but also to temporary and casual persons. The size of the termination package was $2.6 billion. At an average per employee of $520,000. In addition to that, the new companies, there are 4 companies that have set up to replace the previous Petrotrin. 2 of them are going to be active companies. That is Heritage, which is a company that's going to be engaged in exploration and production, and Paria, which is going to be the company that will be importing and selling product and exporting product. Those companies will employ at least 1,000 employees directly. In addition to that, it will be those companies, both of them, will be outsourcing in the technical field in terms of logistics, field operations, security workers, and so on. They will also be outsourcing non-technical support in terms of maintenance, janitorial work, landscaping, auto repairs, machine shop, and so on, so that a lot of the people who were terminated and a lot of the people in the fence line industry areas who would have been negatively impacted by the closure of Petrotrin would have the opportunity both for direct re-employment and also for opportunity for outsourcing directly with those companies. In terms of what the employees qualified for on the termination of employment, of the 3,400 permanent employees, almost half of them qualified for pension as at December 1st, 2018. So these 1,343 employees would not only have received their termination payments, but they would also have received the lump sum due under the pension plan and be entitled to their monthly pension payments. The company had an employee assistance program in place, and it beefed up that program for the purpose of dealing with the trauma that we knew would arise out of the terminations and to address all the issues and provide the support that the employees needed. So in terms of that support, for the period up to December 31st, there have been 112 group interventions attended by 1,586 participants. There have been group financial workshops to advise people on options that they have for investment and for savings and for seeking alternative job opportunities and so on. There have been 63 group financial workshops attended by 964 participants. There have been individual and family financial counseling, 95 of those. There have been individual and family counseling. So we have financial counseling and we have other family counseling to deal with potential things like domestic abuse arising out of frustration of the breadwinner no longer being employed and so on. So we have provided and we continue to provide the support the company does because we do appreciate that there are challenges that are being faced by people who wake up one morning and no longer have a job. In looking at this issue, I also consider the fact because we tend to operate on the assumption that all the people working at Petrotrin would be traumatized by the loss of this job, by the loss of their jobs. But of the 3,400 permanent employees, for example, half of them, more than half of them actually, 2,000 of them are millennials. And what the studies have shown is that millennials don't stick around in one job for life. They move around. So in a publication by Harvard Education Profession, written by a gentleman by the name of Mackenzie Kassab, he said this: "The future is here. Millennials have taken over the workforce. They are tech-savvy, adaptable, and creative. But they also have a unique set of expectations and demands." And he said that on average, in a 2015 study by the Education Advisory Board of the US suggests that millennials will job hop up to 20 times in their career, about twice as many times as their baby boomer counterparts. So what we have are a group of people who are not committed to stay in a job for life. They welcome the opportunity for change and trying new things. So imagine in a context of a person who is thinking, well, I'll stay here for a couple of years and then move, and he's moving with a lump sum that he would not otherwise have got. So he may not be as adverse to the idea of this termination as other people who, when we went into the job, when I first joined the workforce, the normal worker would say, okay, I'm going into this job and I will stay there forever. There is a large percentage of the Petrotrin workforce that may not have been of that ilk. So their approach to the termination may not have been as dire as we would anticipate that they otherwise have been. So in the financial counseling that we would have provided, not only would we have spoken to them about job opportunities in the company and outside of the company, but we would have reminded them of certain government investment programs that they might have wished to take advantage of, having regard to the fact that they have this lump sum, either with the company or in the national community. So As I said, in addition to the company re-engaging 1,000 people, it would also be outsourcing work. It would be going out to have people operate lease operatorships. You have people coming out of Petrotrin who have expertise in that area. So an opportunity, for example, would present itself for them either alone or in groups to invest in equipment and take part in those opportunities, because the company is going to be seriously embarking on exploration and production activity. There is that. There is the HDC housing incentive, where the government, where the HDC pays an individual who gets involved in this housing program, produces houses for sale to people on the HDC qualifying list. So you build a house to HDC spec, you have a guaranteed purchaser because the HDC has a list of 176,000 applicants. You get paid within a short time by TTMF, who mortgages most, who provides the financing for most of these. And in addition to that, you can get up to $100,000 on each housing unit that you produce. You have the agricultural incentive program, where there's a similar incentive. You have, as I said, drilling teams and other outsourcing opportunities. So we have these opportunities that people can take advantage of. They would have had, many of them, attractive lump sums that would give them the opportunity to invest in these things. We have, in addition to that, the government recognizing the importance of Petrotrin to the southern area deliberately took a decision to focus a lot of its spend in 2019 and 2020 in the southern area. So my colleagues further on the debate would develop these points more, but we have mentioned before that we have the La Brea dry docking facility, which we expect to come on stream in the not-too-distant future. We have the Phoenix Park Industrial Park, which we expect construction to occur during 2019, which would provide jobs during 2019, during the construction, and thereafter in the manufacturing facilities that are set up. We also are finally starting the San Fernando Waterfront project, which will also, one, live San Fernando, and two, provide further opportunities for jobs. So we did not just carelessly say, let's send people home and we don't care about them. We considered what options these people would have for life after Petrotrin. And we are firmly of the view that there is a lot of opportunity for life after Petrotrin, and we are seeking to counseling them through this transition. So the motion, Madam President, talks about the adverse impact of the closure on the employees. And yes, we admit there's an adverse impact on the employees, but we have put things in place and we continue to put things in place. And what I didn't mention, which Senator Thompson-Ahye mentioned, was the Prime Minister's undertaking that we would provide land and housing to the former employees of Petrotrin as well, to provide them with further relief and support. So while we acknowledge that there is an adverse impact on having your job terminated, we have tried to put things in place to reduce as far as possible that adverse impact. The motion also refers to the adverse impact of the closure of Petrotrin on the economy, and this I refute wholeheartedly. In fact, the maintenance of Petrotrin in the way that it was operating would have been the thing that would have produced the adverse impact on the economy. As I said, the company operating the way it did up to the end of October would not have been able to settle its debt in August 2019. The government was not going to be easily in a position to settle that debt in August of 2019. default was a real possibility. Default would have led to a downgrade. That would have produced a significant adverse impact on the economy that would have impacted all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, not just the 3,400 people in Petrotrin. Not that I'm saying they're not important. What I'm saying is that we have to look at the whole picture and take all our citizens into account in making these decisions. So the portion of the motion that talks about an adverse impact on the economy from the closure of Petrotrin, I refute wholeheartedly. In fact, the projections show that Petrotrin will turn around, the new operations of the new companies, Heritage and Paria, will produce profits rather than the losses that have been generated over the years. They'll be able to generate foreign exchange. They will generate profits. They will pay taxes. They will pay dividends. In fact, the projections of Petrotrin look so positive that Petrotrin is confident that on its own, it can refinance and settle the debt that is due in 2018 without government support, without government guarantee. So that we do not expect an adverse impact on the economy from the decision that has been taken. It was a difficult decision, Madam President. We did not make it lightly. We looked at all the issues, we considered the implications, and we took the decision that we thought we had no choice but to take. So, Madam President, as our Senate prayer indicates, we looked at the matter and decided the matter with honesty, courage, and conviction. We are confident that we took the right decision. We are confident the people of Trinidad and Tobago will soon see the positive impact from that decision, and we will continue to support the employees through the transition into the new phase in their life. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Ma.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Madam President, I want to agree with the Honorable Minister when she said that the people will soon see the reality of the decisions that the government has taken, and they will not put them behind their backs. I think when they see and experience and understand the reality, they will take a decision with this index finger and place the PNM behind their backs. That is what they will do, Madam President. Madam President, I want to tell this Honorable Senator and you today that all that we have been told by the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister who is not here, but who has pronounced on this matter, is a narrative that has been fashioned and shaped to mamagai, fool, and mislead the population. We have done our analysis, and it is at variance, Madam President, with what the government of Trinidad and Tobago is saying in the Senate. They have not as yet confessed to the country the real reason for shutting down Petrotrin. But, Madam President, as our grandfathers and mothers used to tell us, time is longer than twine. I will tell you what the analysis tells me and tells us. 3 reasons the government closed down Petrotrin and not those reasons that they are giving us. Madam President, you would remember, and I'll go into that in a short while, that they paid a company called McKinsey almost, I think, $15 million US. And Madam President, we are told no report was produced. They came in the Senate. I asked the Minister of Energy whether a report was produced by McKinsey for 15 or 16 million US. And Madam President, we were told no report was produced. Our information is that a report was produced by McKinsey. But they never supplied the country with the report that McKinsey produced.
Because it never set a close on Petrotrin.
So, Madam President, let me tell you what are the reasons. You know, Mahatma Gandhi talked about deadly sins. And this is a deadly sin that they have committed against the population. We have surmised, we have concluded, based on our research, 3 reasons. First, they wanted to destroy the OWTU. And that powerful union in that company called Petrotrin, and in the process undermine and weaken that union and put their membership on the breadline. So they can now hire scabs. So it is slavery again in TNT, P&M style, Madam President. So they hire who they want, when they want, at whatever price they offer the workers. First reason. The second reason, Madam President, is that the government wanted to destroy all the evidence, all the documentation surrounding the A&V oil and drilling fake oil scandal. So that, Madam President, there will be nothing to show when the demand is made for the evidence. Where's the evidence? They don't have it. Gone, Madam President. That's the second reason they wanted to shut down Petrotrin. They never forgive Petrotrin for leaking that information. And Madam President, the third reason is what I'll come to in a short while and give you some details. This decision to shut down the refinery and to shut down Petrotrin by extension is to open the door to people to import oil with shady characters, and I'll tell you some of them in a short while, who are facilitating the importation of refined products into our country. No procurement process, Madam President. And Madam President, you're talking about a refinery that is valued at close to I think it's about $40 to $50 billion. So at the end of the day, Madam President, what will happen is that the P&M will use the absence of procurement in order to build a war chest to facilitate, Madam President, activities that have landed a lot of people in jail in a country called Brazil, in an operation called Operation Car Wash, Madam President, because they funneled the money through the middlemen as managers and then ended up in the pockets of politicians for electioneering. That is the third reason that they shut down Petrotrin. They want to develop a war chest using middlemen in order to funnel monies into their war chest for the 2020-2019 general elections. Madam President, you know, if you go right now and you Google www.petrotrin.com. This page does not display. This page cannot be displayed. Madam President, the PNM has shut down the website of Petrotrin. I challenge anybody now to go on the website and Google www.petrotrin.com. And you will see nothing emerging. However, if you Google Petrotrin financial audit, you will see something coming up, but they send you back to www.petrotrin.com, and it's zilch, zero, nothing. Why has the government taken the decision, if Petrotrin is a legacy company, to shut down the website? So if you want to get information, Madam President, on the financial audited accounts of Petrotrin, there is no information available. Madam President, in fact, the only information available to citizens is to come to the Parliament on the Parliament website, and whatever documentation Petrotrin brought, it is on our website. But if you want to go to Petrotrin website to get information, the government has removed and shut down the website. So there's nothing that you can access under Petrotrin. Madam President, why? Why would the government want to shut down that website, Madam President? Madam President, I don't know. They must explain. They must explain who is responsible for shutting down that domain. The domain has been shut down by the government of Trinidad and Tobago through its board of directors at Petrotrin. Madam President, there are some elements from BP whose name I will call. I take full ownership of calling their names today. Who, Madam President, are in league with the government in an effort to undermine the rights and the interests of the people in order to gain what I can only believe, Madam President, is to promote their own self-interest. Madam President, there's a character who floats around Petrotrin, former Petrotrin, and all the new companies that they have formed. He doesn't want to be a director. He stays away from directorship. He's in the background. But he's making all the moves. I understand he's an advisor. He was the advisor, Madam President, to the Petrotrin board. He's the one who recommended the engagement of McKinsey ahead of contender Solomon Associates, even though they came in after. But he's the one who recommended McKinsey on the basis, Madam President, that he had worked for McKinsey back in the days of BPTT when he was president. Madam President, they brought in something called McKinsey here, who they gave the go-ahead, Madam President. They engaged this company, and they told that company that they brought in here that the report that they were that they produced at the end of the day must be adopted by Petrotrin as Petrotrin's own report. There's a corporate secretary there who they use to identify members, largely at the lower level, who could supply the raw material to McKinsey. These members were directed to sign confidentiality agreements, and they were instructed to refrain from disclosing their participation in the board-run process to anyone, even to their supervisors. Madam President, there was no validation of the data being supplied, nor the output by any senior Petrotrin employee. At that time, they had removed the executive management from Petrotrin, so there was no vice president for refinery or exploration or production or even a president. One chap called Robert Riley told certain exploration and production personnel, I understand, that they should not be perturbed because they were very concerned about the young age of these graduates that were coming from McKinsey to do this very important exercise on the future of Petrotrin, Madam President. These consultants were university graduates who they change ever so often after each assignment had ended, Madam President. As they ended one assignment, they flew out and they brought in a new batch, Madam President. Madam President, there's one chap whose name I wouldn't call because he's on the board, but he has what is called in Trinidad and Tobago, a politician made it famous. He had the testicular fortitude to stand up. And he raised certain concerns, Madam President, about certain assumptions that were being made. You see, these people they brought in from McKinsey, they were brought in to do a job. It was a hatchet job to get rid and to destroy Petrotrin. That was their job, Madam President. And one very patriotic, not the fake patriots that we have elsewhere, real patriots, he stood up and questioned the assumptions being used by McKinsey. Madam President, the new plantation owner of Trinidad and Tobago, the new Calder Hart, who lives in both Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago.
Please. I have repeatedly cautioned members, it is your right, you have the absolute right. But when you're speaking about members who are outside of this House, I would ask you to please exercise a little restraint. I'm not preventing you from saying what you have to say, but there's no need for you to be talking about where a person lives and ownership, okay?
I'm talking about a new slave owner.
Senator Mark. Please.
Okay, a planter.
Please.
A planter owner. A new planter class.
Senator
Is that
Mark,
okay, ma'am?
No, please, take your seat. I am asking just for restraint. You're speaking about persons who are not members of this House and cannot defend themselves. I'm just asking, I'm not preventing you from saying what you have to say, but please exercise some restraint when you are speaking about these persons.
Madam President, I want to tell the Honorable President of the Senate, I speak.
No, Senator Mark. Please. Please.
All right, I'm exercising.
Please. No, Senator Mark, I have not finished. I am asking you, I am not preventing you from raising your points. I am not preventing you from calling the names you want to call. I am asking you, though, to stop with the hyperbole, some of what you're raising here. That's what I'm saying. Exercise some restraint, please.
I would hope, Madam President, that what I'm about to say would have encouraged those people who have brutalized 6,000 workers and another 10,000 workers indirectly and almost brought to a halt the livelihoods of 100,000 citizens in South Trinidad, Madam President. Madam President, sometimes you have to agree with me that sometimes you have to stand up and stand up very solidly in defense of those people. Madam President, this individual who I agree with you, I'll deal with him politically on the platform.
Yes, just say it outside.
Don't tell me what to say. I have freedom of speech, you know.
See what happens, Senator Mark, when people, when members do not want to take a little guidance from the chair, it can lead to disorder in this chamber, and I will not allow that. Minister, please allow Senator Mark to make his contribution. Senator Mark, please take the guidance that I am giving you.
Yes, thank you. So, Madam President, this is a gentleman who told you and me and the entire country, fire all, fire all, fire all. Madam President, that is what he told the country. And this is a gentleman, Madam President, that was also party to this McKinsey report, Madam President. So the government has to come clean and tell this country, because I want to tell the government, you know, you ain't going to be there after 2020 or before. If you call a snap election, you lose. The government is planning to call a snap election, you understand? We're preparing for them. You call it in 2020, we prepare for you. Anyhow you come, it looks like peace, Madam President. Snap election or no snap elections? Madam President, so I want to tell Madam President through you to the leader of government business here, Madam President. Madam President, I want to tell the Honorable Minister that
I want to hear what Senator Mark has to say, so please, can we listen? Senator Mark, continue.
So Madam President, they can tell the country whatever they want. They can choreograph whatever narrative they want to choreograph for the country. The people are feeling it, Madam President. Yes. They are feeling it in their bones. What action the government and what decision they have taken against the citizenry of this country. And Madam President, all I was about to tell you is that some of these personnel that they have put in charge of this enterprise, they are insensitive to the needs of the people of this country. And Madam President, I have fought many battles, and I intend to live with the help of God to fight many more. But one of the battles I intend to fight with every sinew of energy in my body is to get rid of this evil, wicked government called the PNM. They do not care, Madam President, they do not care for the people. Madam President, you could tell me they spent $15 million US on a report. They have that report. They came to this parliament and told you and me they don't have a report, and there is a report. So, Madam President, I want to tell you, the fire sale has started. Yeah. The fire sale has started. Madam President, for years, I want to tell you, for some strange reason, when different vesting orders were established, the government deliberately or otherwise may have left it out accidentally. A number of assets that ought to be in the hands, Madam President, of Petrotrin. They left it in the hands of Trintopec and Trintoc. But on the 28th of November 2018, Madam President, Legal Notice 579, signed by the Minister of Finance, they transferred all the assets that were in the hands of Trintoc and Trintopec, you know where, Madam President? In a company that is a shell company for all intents and purposes, something called Petrotrin. Something called Petrotrin. It is not Petrotrin that we know, Madam President. It is something called Petrotrin. Madam President, they have transferred 300 bungalows to Petrotrin. You know why? This is a conduit. So when the creditors, Madam President, call on Petrotrin to pay their bills, Petrotrin have no money. So you know what Petrotrin will do? Sell off 300 bungalows in Pointe-à-Pierre Madam President.
I just have to remind you about the standing orders. You're brandishing.
Sorry, Madam.
Yes, and can I ask you please to face me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I always advise you as a former speaker, you have to rise from that chair, otherwise you could get trouble with your circulation. And I myself have to turn left and right to make sure that I don't collapse whilst I'm on my legs. So you must forgive me, but I will always look at you, Madam President. Madam President, imagine 300 bungalows, Madam President, they are about to dispose through Petrotrin. That is what they are about to do, 300 bungalows. Madam President, you know where these bungalows are going to end up, Madam President? It will end up in the hands of the friends and families of the PNM. That is where it will end up. Madam President, I will circulate that to you. I don't want to read out every bungalow and where it is located. It's so many. But they have found it convenient now to vest it into Petrotrin. Madam President, let me tell you what they are vesting to. They are vesting Petrotrin Staff Club. That is up for sale. The golf courses, up for sale. Rifle range, swimming pool, tennis court, Petrotrin Sports Club, Garakara Park, Human Resource, Beaumont Hill Center, Trade School, Trainee Lecture Hall, Employee Relations Offices, Ian Augustus Long Hospital and Grounds, Wellness Center, even St. Peter's Anglican Church. The best. I don't know if that's for sale too, Madam President. Madam President, the Yacht Club, gone. Bon Accord House, Pleasant, gone. Madam President, what was interesting is that I saw, Madam President, in the newspapers sometime last year, 21st of November, so even before they vested this, Madam, which is the 28th, Madam President, of November, they had already given Massey, the same Massey, and I'll talk about that when I deal with procurement at TSTT, with an Oracle deal. So, yes, Madam. Madam President, you know what they did? They gave Massey, they bought some, what I call second-hand communications equipment from Massey. You know for how much, ma'am? $250 million TT dollars. When there was a protest, they brought it on 225. 225 million. And you know what they have done, Madam President? Petrotrin has in Tobago a property which is in this order. It's called Tobago Vacation Home at Mount Irving, Tobago. Madam President, this was advertised. I'll give you a copy, because I know I can't display it. But Madam President, nice swimming pool, luxurious arrangements. And since the 21st of November, Massey Realty advertising this in T&T. So the government has taken a decision already, Madam President, without any procurement legislation in place to dispose of the assets that I'll pass on to you in this legal notice. To who? Anybody they want to give to. Anybody they want to give to, Madam President. And they are telling this country, Madam President, that they care. Madam President, I want to also let you know, you know we have begun to import fuel. You know that, Madam President? You know where the fuel is coming from? We are told, given an answer by the Minister of Energy on the 18th of this month in the other place. We are importing fuel. Madam President, you know who is supplying the fuel? The same advisor company who brought in an entourage to take control and to dispose of Petrotrin and to create this new so-called heritage and Paria and Garakara. the famous Robert Riley. You know, Madam President, I wonder if it's coincident, Madam President, that we are being told, in answer to a question by David Lee, on the 18th of this month, the Minister of Energy tells us that the supplier of refined products for commercial use is BP International Sales and Trading. Madam President, is it accidental that the advisor to Petrotrin in the transition to mash it up and destroy it, where they brought in a fellow called Campbell, Neil Campbell, they brought in somebody called Alice, some Ali lady. They brought in a lady called Ali, Alisa, Ali, something like that, and another one, Madam President. And they are the ones, Madam President, who were able to manage with Mr. Espinay the crash of this company called Petrotrin. And, Madam President, what has happened? In return, they have negotiated, the government has negotiated with them to get our products from where, Madam President? BP International Sales and Trading. So the government crushes Petrotrin, destroys the refinery, closes down the refinery, sends home 5,000 workers, Madam President. But you know what they do instead? After they did that, they give a contract to BP International Sales and Trading to bring in all the products for diesel, Madam President, for super gasoline, for premium, for aviation fuel. And Madam President, we don't know how this was done because the procurement regulator and the procurement law is still to be proclaimed. So it is government doing their own thing. And I want to tell you, Madam President, I want to tell you something. I have an article that I saw in Reuters and one in Wall Street Journal, one dated December the 14th. Because before I go there, I must tell you, it's not only importation is in trouble, you know. We need a criminal forensic investigation into the entire operations of these set of new companies and how this government is going about importing. Madam President, you know who are our exporters of crude in this country? The minister told us on the 18th. In the other place, I have the answer here. Trafigura, an international trading company, a big one. The other one, Madam President, is ExxonMobil. The third one is Shell. And the fourth one is Petrojam. Those are the four companies, Madam President, that are exporting our oil to where we don't know. All we know is that the minister is boasting WTI plus 3. That is what we get, or 2. That is what we get in. But, Madam President, the company, the biggest one that is exporting is Trafigura. I have an article here that says, in Reuters, or Reuters as they call it, December the 14th, 2018, by Brad Brooks. Brazilian prosecutors charge ex Trafigura oil executives with graft and corruption. I wonder if the minister is aware of this. Madam President, this is dated the 14th of December, 2018. And they are all part of a network in something called Operation Car Wash in Brazil that has the former president of Brazil, Madam President, as we speak, Lula, in jail. And this Trafigura is the leading company exporting our oil, along with what the minister said, ExxonMobil, Shell, and Petrojam. Madam President, these executives are now facing criminal charges in Brazil for bribing employees, using them as middlemen in order to transfer the money to politicians for election purposes. That is what they are charged for in Brazil. And the other one, Madam President, is in the Wall Street Journal. And this one, Madam President, is dated December the 14th, 2018, by Jeffrey Lewis. It reads, Brazil prosecutors charge former Trafigura Petrobras executives with corruption. I want to tell the Honorable Minister, be careful with who you bring here to export our crude. Madam President, Petrojam is a Jamaican company, we all know. We all know that. They are a company out of Jamaica. But I want to tell you something. Petrojam is jointly owned by the Jamaican government and PDVSA of Venezuela. And we understand, Madam President, that, that BP International has a 20% shareholding in a Russian company called Rosneft, R-O-S-N-E-F-T, Madam President, and that is the majority creditor to a company called Citgo, C-I-T-G-O, which is 100% owned by the Venezuelan state. Citgo, sorry, Citgo. Madam President, recently I read in the papers where the Jamaican government is saying they are going to buy out the 50% owned by PDVSA. Because I do not know, Madam President, and the Minister must tell us, whether the refined products that we are importing through BP, that has a big interest in Rosneft, that is linked to, Citgo?
Senator Mark, you have 5 more minutes.
Whether, Madam President, this government is importing from the U.S. Gulf Coast through Petrojam the very products that we are exporting as heavy crude into Trinidad and Tobago. Because this particular company, CITGO, have their refineries located in Texas and Louisiana on the Gulf Coast of the United States. And we just hope that the minister and this government is not exporting our oil to Petrojam and to other PDVSA's refineries to have the very refined products re-imported into Trinidad and Tobago. This is not economically viable at all. So, Madam President, I want the minister to know that what is happening in this country under their watch is not in the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, when Carney was closed by this government, casual workers, temporary workers, regular workers, seasonal workers, everybody was treated equally. They got 2 acres of land, they got 1 lot of land for residents. You know, Madam President, hundreds, thousands of temporary workers, casual workers, working for Petrotrin has gone home with nothing.
Proud of that.
Nothing. And Madam President, I recall from a discussion I had with someone that there was a gentleman who worked for 7 months at Carney in the refinery section. He got his full pay. He got 2 acres of land, and he got a lot for residential purposes. After 7 months. Madam President, there are people who have worked in Petrotrin for 10 and 15 and 20 years as temporary workers, casual workers. They give them nothing, Madam President. Only temporary people, they give something. But those who are not temporary, they get nothing, Madam President. Madam President, there are so many issues that we have to discuss. But as you have said, time would not permit me to go into details on this particular matter. All I want to ask, Madam President, in closing, I want to ask the Minister the following question, Madam President. We would like to know, Madam President, who are the owners of professional resourcing services? We would like to know who are the owners of professional resourcing services. We would like to know if Mr. Robert Riley is involved in this particular company. Madam President, this is a company that is carrying out an arrangement where they are engaging workers and they are recruiting on behalf of Heritage, Paria, Garakara, and the Holdings Company, the professional resourcing company. So we would like to know, Madam President, who are the owners of this company, because it appears that they have a contract to be the sole source contract where they provide personnel to this company or to these companies that they call, well, I've just outlined them. Madam President, in closing, I just want to bring to your attention an article in today's papers where it says you have to pay credit before you get fuel. Madam President, we have gone from a situation where we had energy security to a situation where we are hostages to international oil companies who are allowed to refine products through BP and bring into our country. So they are saying, Madam President, if you do not pay us cash in advance, and Madam President, NP is going to be in trouble. They are saying that if NP don't pay the bill, and this is the Minister of Finance, if he doesn't pay his bills, they are going to take action. So you have a situation that is developing, Madam President, that is extremely serious. And Madam President, in closing, regular gasoline, bitumen, and the lease operators, in particular, they have not been paid since November. And I understand they are threatening to close down, and hundreds of workers may be on the breadline. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Teemal.
Thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity to make this contribution on private motion that is under debate in this House, private motion brought by Senator Ramdeen. Madam President, there is no doubt that we are indeed in difficult economic times in this country. And again, there is no doubt that difficult times call for difficult decisions to be made. Somebody has to make them. And I think the burden of the responsibility falls on the government of the day. And in this particular matter, the government has indeed taken a bold step in making what must have been a very difficult decision. But coupled with difficult decisions is how we manage the implementation of those decisions and how we manage them, particularly in terms of how we mitigate against the impacts on the population of Trinidad and Tobago, a population which is already under tremendous distress from austere economic measures that have been put in place over the years. And often it is not only a question of what is our financial responsibility, what is our legal responsibility, but question of what is our social and human responsibility in terms of the decisions that we have to make and its subsequent implementation. Madam President, significant retrenchment kicked off really with ArcelorMittal in the first quarter of 2016, coming into fruition about mid-2016. And it is interesting to note the initial reaction and the initial actions and thoughts expressed at that time and point by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think overall, there would have been outrage, utmost concern, particularly in the context not only of how it was done and the legality of it, but the impact it had on the workers of ArcelorMittal. Unfortunately, a couple of years down the line, not too far apart, coupled with ongoing retrenchment since that time to now, due to this difficult decision of the government regarding Petrotrin, not only has the government, who is the major employer of persons in Trinidad and Tobago, they have now become the major avenue of retrenchment of workers in Trinidad and Tobago because of these difficult decisions that they have had to make. So it is instructional, not only to the public, it is instructional to the private sector in terms of how we treat with our workers, how the state treats with its workers. For, of course, the private sector, as we have seen in the case of ArcelorMittal and how they approach retrenchment. The private sector is, of course, going to be influenced or look at what they could possibly think about, in inverted commas, getting away with if they follow the lead of the state. Which is why the state is in such an unenviable position, because being both employer and having to make tough decisions where they have to retrench workers, they have to be like a role model employer when it comes to dealing with the workers of this country. Whatever investigations went into this, making the decision about retrenching workers, Madam President, it took place rather quickly. I think Senator Thompson-Ahye mentioned about the haste and how sudden this came about to the thousands of workers in Petrotrin. And we are seeing and have seen what I would say a significant paradigm shift. A paradigm shift in treating with workers of the country. And I'd just like to quote from an address by the Honorable Minister of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, Senator Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, at a weekly luncheon meeting of the Rotary Club of Port-of-Spain West on Wednesday, 20th, 2016. And this quote is just in keeping with the point I'm developing about that shift. And because of the shift, the onus on the government of Trinidad and Tobago to demonstrate at all times goodwill regarding the workers of Trinidad and Tobago. and I quote the minister, the question being put forward today is retrenchment or no retrenchment. As a Minister of Labor, I would say no retrenchment. As part of the business community, you should say no retrenchment. I say this because we are all in the same boat together. When the storm comes, we ought not throw our precious resources overboard, our people. These are the same people that have built our businesses, our schools, our nation. These are in many cases loyal employees who have given years of service. And understand this, when the storm is over, we will be searching for these very same employees who possess immeasurable skills and knowledge to help repair and sail. Also, from the same address, I just want to underscore the point that retrenchment in large numbers is bad for the economy, bad for business, bad for society, and bad for the individuals and affected families. To the economy, unemployment coupled with decreased revenue stagnates. When retrenchment happens in large numbers, it is difficult for an economy already dealing with decreased revenue to absorb large numbers of unemployed persons. As well as these unemployed persons are usually very experienced and highly skilled, so getting another job that is close to the standard of living that they are accustomed to is a difficult prospect. So we are seeing a significant shift out of economic necessity. So how we treat with, or appear to treat with, the workers of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam President, it bears on the economic future and prosperity of our nation. At that time, we were talking about thousands. And now, I guess I would just be throwing out figures. But can we safely say maybe over 10,000, probably up to 15,000 people have been retrenched over the couple of years. So not only are we in an economic crisis, we are in a retrenchment crisis. And although the intent of the government has changed from several years to now, as I said, out of necessity, I think regarding the close of Petrotrin, this House, although we have had very, very good contributions from government senators on the reasons why Petrotrin was closed, in terms of reports and in terms of detailed analysis as to why, we have not seen those presented in this House. Madam President, there is no doubt that in terms of job loss due to redundancy, it is not just a question of financial implications and financial repercussions. All research that has been done worldwide in terms of the effects and the impact of retrenchment on workers confirm significant psychological effects on the retrenched worker, the affected worker. What is even more telling is that the effects would be more devastating during an economic downturn, during which unemployment would be high, and the retrenched worker would face difficulty in finding another job of similar status. More often than not, the labor market would be flooded with other job seekers with similar skills and experiences. Additionally, the effect of job loss will be more felt when the worker has been in service for a long time as in the case of Petrotrin, and further, when it involves only specific skills, as in the case of Petrotrin, which may be of little use to potential employers, which again is the case of Petrotrin. Workers who manage to secure new employment would be unable to use their skills in their new job, most likely because they would be underemployed and are likely to experience psychological adjustments while employed. And of course, coping with all of these problems can create not only physical, but mental stress, emotional stress, which may contribute to social and psychological disorders. Madam President, allow me to just quote the preamble B, of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And I read, respect the principles of social justice and therefore believe that the operation of the economic system should result in the material resources of the community being so distributed as to subserve the common good, that there should be adequate means of livelihood for all, that labor should not be exploited or forced by economic necessity to operate in inhumane conditions, but there shall be opportunity for advancement on the basis of recognition of merit, ability, and integrity. Madam President, the framers of our Constitution mentioned about economic necessity. And out of economic necessity, labor should not be exploited to operate in inhumane conditions. So by mentioning the human condition, not only is it a question of physical well-being, but we are speaking about the emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being of workers of this country. And Madam Speaker, which is why we just can't only rely, due to this human condition framed in our Constitution, a government, I believe, is expected to go beyond the call with regards to that mental, emotional aspect of humanity. Good industrial practice would call for adequate notice, which must be given to affected employees before retrenchment, to prepare them and to look for suitable alternative employment. This is the worldwide aspect, Madam Speaker. And of course, good practice must contain information such as the reasons for retrenchment, number of employees likely to be affected, etc., when retrenchment is likely to take place. And I would like to ask a question. In the haste, whether justified or not, how much of this approach was taken in terms of the retrenchment process? Prior notice is good industrial practice to minimize the traumatic impact of retrenchment on the workers and their families. Consultation with employees likely to be affected by retrenchment must be carried out. In other words, Madam President, retrenchment is not an event to be implemented. It is not an action to be implemented, but rather it is a process to be managed. In this regard, Madam President, I come back to, again, the intent of government. In 2016, with the ArcelorMittal situation. And what was done? The Minister did mention in that address I referred to earlier, assistance, including the establishment of a national retrenchment register, provision of new job opportunities, provision of seed capital and startup business financing and support in forming cooperatives, formation of small businesses and cooperative focus on training and development, and at that time, hosting of an Empowerment Jobs Expo for retrenched workers in April 2016, titled Turning Adversity into Opportunity. The Job Expo offered unemployed persons the opportunity to register with the National Employment Service, interact with potential employers for various sectors, and access information and assistance in areas of financial literacy, health and wellness, counseling, training, retraining, certification, and entrepreneurial development. Mr. President, I would ask, along these lines, what has been done for the Petrotrin workers?
That is in place, and they can access the 10-point plan.
Madam President, Madam President, I come to the Petrotrin Employee Assistance Program Services Limited. That was a fully owned subsidy of Petrotrin. And I would like to ask, with the approach to, in terms of mitigating the impacts and the psychological impacts of retrenchment, what role did the Petrotrin Employee Assistance Program Services Limited, a fully owned subsidiary of Petrotrin, what role were they given? I am under the impression that that subsidy of Petrotrin was closed as well together with the closure of Petrotrin. And as such, the primary subsidy within Petrotrin, or owned by Petrotrin, that could have brought about coordinated, systematic assistance, particularly in terms of retrenchment, with the closure of that subsidiary, how were such programs implemented? The Honorable Minister Allyson West mentioned certain statistics were given about who were helped and all of these things. But through what facility in Petrotrin were these programs implemented? And I question really if there is a specific subsidiary there was of Petrotrin in terms of really dealing with retrenchment and the retrenched Petrotrin workers. Why was not the Petrotrin Employee Assistance Program Services Limited kept alive to ensure the welfare of the retrenched workers of Petrotrin? As I close, I must say, I must ask, about the Petrotrin employees' pension plan. And ask the question, are the employees whose pensions are guaranteed under that plan, are those pensions safe? And are they guaranteed? Are they guaranteed? Because during the course, prior to the closure of Petrotrin or soon after, the trustees of that fund, Republic Bank Limited, did raise some concerns about the longevity and the sustainability of that fund, subject to the amount of persons that would be accessing that plan due to the retrenchment process in Petrotrin. So I'm asking, is that pension plan, is it a guarantee that all the workers who were part of that plan would be able to avail themselves of the benefits of that pension plan? And in closing, Madam President, the reason why I've raised these things is not only in the context of Petrotrin. I'm not saying that retrenchment is a process rather than an event, and placing the government at the helm to set the example and be the role model for the entire country as an employer in terms of retrenchment and measures that affect workers is that Senator Vieira, in his contribution to this motion, spoke about the impact of technology on work. Retrenchment is not only going to come about due to difficult economic situations, but it is a fact that retrenchment is going to increase due to the impact of technology, and particularly artificial intelligence and AI. Recently, I was speaking to a worker who works in one of the major food companies in Trinidad. And he was informing me that there's a robot that was introduced into the warehousing operations. And he says when that robot is a pilot project, and when that robot is fully trained, they have been told that there's going to be a loss of 26 employees being replaced by that one robot. So changes being brought about by AI is going to contribute to the retrenchment crisis that we are in. So it is important that we get it right. And I must say that the Honorable Minister of Labor has on several times informed this House of the progress that is being made with regards to amendments to the Industrial Relations Act, the Workmen's Compensation Act, and the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act. But, Madam President, deliberations on these, according to a press release done July 31st, 2018, at a media conference, it was hinted that work on those amendments were going on for the past 11 months. So if we add into present time, we are talking about 16 months. I know the government is in a difficult position because they have to run concurrently with the revision to these acts. Actions have to be taken that is leading to retrenchment. So it's a tough exercise. But 16 months, Madam President, yes, sounds like a long time, it is. And maybe because of the tripartite aspects of these revisions, it's tough to get consensus. But really and truly, we need to see, She says that, the Honourable Minister says that her staff is working very hard, and we commend them on that. And they are working into the late hours of the night, and a lot of effort is being put in. But I'm sure that with these revisions coming into being, a sense of assurance is going to enter our country in terms of the working population of this country. I thank you.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And what a difficult debate this is from the standpoint of the nature of the discussions that have been going on. But I want to tell you that none of us are far removed from it, and I think I may have spoken about this in sometime at the end of last year, and I said that I too had a connection in that my father was, when we were very young, he worked in the cable department in Shell. And once he was able to see my mother through her year in Mona, she was a pupil teacher, and had the opportunity to go to Mona to do her certificate in education. And once my father was able to see her through that, at that time, the VSEP offering was going on in Shell. And my dad took it. But I never remembered sad days. And I'm by no means saying that this is a situation which would exist with all of the persons who were affected. But my father took that and turned it into a positive. And I do recall, from then on, there was never sadness about it. It was always excitement. And he got into business, and the rest is history. And what a good history it was. Again, it's not as easy for all of those persons who were affected. Not as easy at all. But I say that to say that there is hope. And later on in my discussions, I will speak to some of the points that Senator Teemal raised and Senator Anthony Vera raised about the changing tide with regard to artificial intelligence. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, Senator Vera, sorry, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is not just new. Fourth Industrial Revolution is continuing from the Third Industrial Revolution, which, sorry, excuse me, yeah. And this has been going on for a long time, many years. As a matter of fact, when that government was in power, we were in fact in the midst of the Third Industrial Revolution. And so when your political leaders spoke about, wrote about that in the newspaper recently, the AI is not new. AI is not new. It's an extension of the Third Industrial Revolution.
Listed policy plans.
And policy plans, I will talk to you about that as we go along. But Madam President, this is not a giggling matter, as the members on the front bench opposite to me would have it seem to be. It is not anything to be giggling about. This is a serious matter. But let me start this debate where Senator Mark started, by waving his finger when he started his contribution. And I want to tell him, he was waving his index finger, saying that the population will speak to this at the time of elections. And I want to tell him that this is precisely what this is not about. This is not about politics. This is a very, very, very serious matter. And to introduce this kind of matter as you have an opportunity to speak to it. Yes.
Senators Hussain and Obika, if you do not want to hear what the minister has to say, you have the option of leaving. You can leave voluntarily, but if you continue, it will not be voluntary. Continue, Minister.
Yeah. And it's the very reason politics, why those people, when they were in government, the UNC government, couldn't take the kind of decision that we eventually took. All of that time, Madam President, things were bad. Things were not good in Petrotrin, all through 2010 to 2015. That government never had the backbone to take the decision that should have been taken. In fact, they were part of the continuing spend that was taking place in Petrotrin in those days. And I will speak about that. So completely oblivious about the negative financial circumstances of Petrotrin, and at a time when there were great revenue streams, and they could have, and the cushion would have been better, and they could have taken that decision. They never chose to. So today he comes here, completely ignoring the economic circumstances of the country and how the country was being affected by Petrotrin, and waved his finger and turned it all into politics. And it's the same thing, you know, from 2014, this country was having falling revenue streams. Things were not good, and they continued to spend and not act in the best interests of this country. And that's where we are. But they will never, I give him the talks about car wash and washing and so on and waving his finger. They will never return to the corridors of power in this country. Absolutely never return to the corridors of power. And you come here.
Point of order. Standing order 46-1. There's no relevance to the debate at hand.
Continue, Minister.
Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Mean.
And he went on to talk, I mean, at the discussion, we were talking about the new buyers of crude oil. And we were talking about the fact that those buyers were Trafigura, ExxonMobil, Shell, and I think Petrojam. And he forgets. We are talking about large multinational companies, and you come here calling names, talking about a deal with BP. What deal? We are not in any deals with BP. BP has been pounding and placing in substantial investments in this country for a number of years, and they've given commitments, Senator Khan, that they will continue to invest into this country for the next 10 years. Such is the confidence that they have in this PNM-led government. So what deal? What deal is he talking about? What does he know about Trafigura? Yes, some executives may have been questioned, or there might be an investigation. They may no longer be in office, but you're dealing with a company that has been in office that has been in operation for 25 years. I just Googled them. They're a multinational commodity trading company. They're trading in base metals and energy. They're legally registered in Singapore. One of the world's largest leading independent commodity trading logistics, and you come in here to call names and to accuse us of having some ulterior motive by conducting business with Trafigura. Everything that this new company has done, Heritage and Paria, has been open and transparent and done through the proper tendering processes, and that is a fact. So that, yes, let me confirm that we did have the first importation of fuel for commercial use, and that started in October, and the name of the initial supplier was BP International Sales and Trading. BP is one of the most well-regarded international companies. We are fortunate to have BP conducting business with us. So disappointing in Senator Mark in trying to bring the BP into disrepute here in this cabinet. And yes, 5 cargoes have been sold, crude oil, and Minister Khan was on record of speaking of the prices that we got, WTI plus $2 US per barrel.
Point of order 46-6. Senator Mark did not try to bring BP into dispute. He was pointing to an individual.
May I just point out, Senator Obika, that when a standing order is to be invoked, it must be invoked with relevance and with a proper regard for the standing order. Continue, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. So that Paria has started business. The thing is going. Paria has started business. Heritage has started business. And I will speak a little later if I get the chance after I make the more relevant points that I want to speak to. There is a bright future for this company, and we must all participate in it. And he goes on to talk about the vesting orders and assets left out. And I'm surprised. Does not talk again about the economics and the financial situation of the company and the big debt hole. No conversation about that. But he comes here to talk about the yacht club and the bungalow. Who get in the bungalow? And that is the nature of the conversation here from Senator Mark. The golf course. And the Guaracara Park. We understand, that is part of the character of Petrotrin. It's part of the old Petrotrin. It's part of the character of San Fernando. We understand the fallout with all of these things. But it is minuscule in terms of what we faced. And yet, Senator Mark chose to ignore that. But as a responsible government, we could not. We absolutely could not. And Senator Teemal, you're so right. It was such a very difficult situation to deal with. And it took a prime minister like ours to deal with it. And from the time he came into office, I remember in 2017, early 2017, we came into office in late 2016, early 2017, he started coming to the, we came into 2015, and if you let me finish my sentence, in late 2016, early 2017, he started talking to the nation about Petrotrin. Petrotrin, and he went into to spotlight on energy and so on. The population has been involved from the earliest opportunity, and I will speak to the sequential order of how things happened as well. But let me just say again, and I'll speak to Senator Mark again, and he comes up with these stories that we wanted to destroy the OWTU and put the membership on the breadline and so on. But again, in the course of the many consultations by the Prime Minister to the public, by the Minister of Energy and the board to the OWTU, OWTU was involved, and I will speak later again about that. They were very involved to the point where at one meeting, they actually supported the restructuring of Petrotrin into business units. They understood where this was going, and that was recorded as a result of discussions during one meeting. He talks about destroying A&V drilling. He talks about A&V drilling and wanting to destroy the evidence and that kind of nonsense. But that matter has not been lost. That matter is still going through the arbitration process. There are 3 arbitrators assigned to this. There's no loss of evidence. The matter is ongoing. It is being dealt with. Nothing is hidden or anything like that. Where does Senator Mark come up with these kinds of things? And then he talks, and again, he talked about the shady characters and the bogus people and building a war chest. Where you get all these spurious where has he concocted? How does he concoct these things? War chest, building a war chest for the elections. Difficult, very, 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 very difficult. And at no time, again, I don't want to repeat, but Senator West spoke about the $850 million U.S. bond, $6 billion that is up for payment in August 2019. We were in a recession. How are we meeting this payment? And it's a single payment. It's a bullet payment. And then by 2021, another $700 million. How were we going to make that? Even the programs, some of which we were involved with, the gas optimization program and so on, there were significant overruns, which the company could not carry. The GTL project, and yes, they could blame us how much they want for it. The point is we ended up in a situation where the project management was very bad on all of these large projects, and the result of it is the overruns were there and added to the conundrum of the whole financial situation of Petrotrin. The ultra-low sulfur diesel plant, again, 98% mechanically completed, but it couldn't be operationalized because of the structural deficiencies and the faulty foundation. And it would have taken another $350 million US to fix that. Where was that $350 million US coming from? Which is a $2 billion. So the $2 billion, the $850, the $750, substantial. And our declining revenues. I sit in cabinet and I see for working capital, Madam President, for working capital, banks were asking for a guarantee by the government. Any guarantee by the government amounts to contingent liability, and it ups our debt to GDP ratio.
Working capital to buy crude.
And this is for working capital. They were in such a conundrum, a financial conundrum, that they could not secure debt on their own. and so that government guarantees were required to support. And it was just spiraling downward. We had no choice. And Prime Minister took a very early, Cabinet took a very early decision and appointed this new board under Wilfred Espinay, and I'm not afraid to call his name, because it's these people coming forward and giving their service to this country. You don't find that, you know, difficult to find people with the adequate skills to give up their time. You can ever pay these people for the job that they're doing? Not at all. So they've come forward, and we begun to see in their last financial statements, in last quarter financial statements, ended June 2018. We began to see the benefits of the results of restructuring and keeping your expenditure down and so on. But Madam President, that was not enough, and so the decision had to be taken if it is that Petrotrin had to survive. Difficult, 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 but one that we just absolutely had to attend to. So, Madam President, I'll tell you something about this whole financial consideration. You realize that the structure of the motion was completely devoid of any discussion about economics or finances. Very clever of Senator Ramdeen. All kind of thing in emotion, all the different limbs, not one limb concerning the dire straits of Petrotrin. Very clever on your part. But, and he says he is, it'll get you nowhere. But, as I said, very difficult decision. But you all brought up the point about consultation. And I make the point again and stress the Honourable Prime Minister did his part in bringing it to the population. Again, the Lashley report was presented sometime in June 2017, and when the Minister of Energy got the Lashley report, immediately I know that you held a meeting with the OWT and the President General. That was in July of 2017, and discussions were held on that, and on the unsatisfactory performance of Petrotrin. So that discussions were ongoing about the working capital deficit, the losses within the refining and the marketing areas, the money that was owed to the government. So what was there to gain by Petrotrin anymore, except that it employed people? And it came upon the government to find the solution, to fix it, and find ways, and I'll speak to it, about how these people can be re-employed and their situations turned around again. And I made the point in the course of the consultation that OWTU did support the idea of restructuring Petrotrin into business units and recognizing the need for greater accountability and the strengthening of the board and so on. And then following all of that, Cabinet would have accepted the Lashley report and the recommendations of the committee, and then we took decisions that the restructured Petrotrin must be managed and governed as a competitive business aimed at becoming a sustainable, profitable entity which the people of Trinidad and Tobago can depend on. And again, that's when the board was brought into place in September, and then following from that, and I want to remind this Honourable House about something, the Lashley report. The Lashley report, there was a member of the OWTU, we never left them out. There was a member of the OWTU on that Lashley committee. Am I right, Senator? Two. There were two members of the OWTU on the Lashley committee. So you talk about consultation, they were involved all along the way. And then in
Hussein, second morning, continue, Minister.
Yeah. And then again, in discussing the way forward and the outcome of the work of this new board, I do recall that at some point, again, the Honourable Prime Minister had invited OWTU for discussions and along the way, and it was declined. And then, even when the construct of the new board, the Prime Minister did invite OWTU to make a nomination, and they also declined. So they were invited to be part of this new process in reconstructing and reinventing Petrotrin. They declined. And I'm saying all this to tell you the length and breadth which the government went to, in fact, make known or involve the union, contrary to what Senator Mark said, in the whole process of reinventing Petrotrin. And then the Lashley report was laid in this House. Laid as a paper in the House and referred to a Joint Select Committee on Energy, and referred to the Joint Select Committee on Energy Affairs. Open for all to see. Right? And the committee discussed the report at a number of meetings, and there were public hearings with both Petrotrin and the Ministry of Energy as well. So there was consultation right through the entire process. But I come now to speak to the point of the job losses. And Senator Teemal would have spoken about the National Register of Retrenched Workers, and I give you the assurance that there is one in place. And you're right, in 2016, with the fallout with ArcelorMittal, there was a job expo which was organized by the Minister of Labour and well attended, and many of those persons came subsequently to be employed. There's continuing assistance by the Petrotrin Employee Assistance Program as well. And at every way possible, there is assistance. But I can tell you that particularly in my ministry, the ministry which I lead, and in the Ministry of Tourism, in several other ministries that are responsible for diversification and responsible for developing projects. And again, with the particular focus on San Fernando, there's a lot of work going on to ensure that there's opportunity for the people, in particular in the Southland. And there's another question. I want to speak more about that, and then I'll come to the point you made about the pension plan. But I think it was Senator Vera again who spoke about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and again you raised the possibility of job losses. Interestingly, there was an article in the Trinidad, in the Sunday Express on the 20th of January this year, and the article is entitled, "IT creates more jobs than we lose." And it goes on to talk about the cycle of job loss and job creation and the fact that it is happening ever faster. And what it was saying is, the article says that you'll be surprised that you think that IT is going to cause job losses to a large extent. What this analysis tells us, and it was done by the World Economic Forum, is in fact there are other jobs that will be created along the way. So what this speaks to is the fact that persons, and even those, not only those who have lost their jobs, but I speak to youngsters as well, one has to be careful in terms of what you choose to study, and you also have to be, it doesn't matter your station in life, you continually have to retool yourself and get ready for the ever-evolving and changing world, an interconnected world that we live in. And that is a fact. And I mean, I don't want to, I'm not seemingly speaking in an uncaring fashion, but that's the reality of the world in which we live. So it says here that there are new professions that will define the future. And I want to quote Madam President, because it says, "One of the jobs expected to cease existing will shock many bright Trinidad and Tobago students." And that job is the job of a lawyer. And it went on to say, the article, "This is because software and algorithms will be able to more effectively adjudicate on legal matters. Financial analysts," I see the Madam President smiling, but we're close to retirement. "Financial analysts, accountants, and auditors are also expected to fall by the wayside." Listen to me, Senator Ramdeen, you're on the young side. And you're on the young side, so take note. But what should you be training for? That's the question. What should you be training for? And they're saying here that managers, human resource specialists, supply chain and logistics specialists are some of the safe options that are there. And roles that require the negotiating with other people, you're talking about sales and marketing and so on. And of course, there'll always be a job for a politician and a senator, right? But I say all of this to say that you cannot escape the environment in which you exist. And you see all of those creative people that are out there as well, there are huge opportunities there for them in the creative sector and so on. So that the minister would have spoken to the projects that we are focusing on for the South and Central Trinidad. But apart from focusing on the areas, the focus also has to be on the sectors, because there are many of those persons with engineering skills and so on. Yes, they may have to redefine themselves in terms of the particular skills, but they're open to employment within the manufacturing sector, certainly. And I'm talking about those persons with engineering skills, and certainly in the maritime sector. And we've spoken to the population about the new projects that will be created and the kinds of job activities that will be there, the opportunities that should be created. And I can tell you from the standpoint, from the manufacturing sector, you spoke about job losses. And I'm going to tell you the areas of opportunity. I can tell you that certainly in the manufacturing sector, with that Phoenix Park Industrial Estate, which is being done by this government, it is at the stage where we have signed a memorandum of understanding. We have actually completed the feasibility study. We have the commercial agreement has been completed. It is before the EME to satisfy that process. The employer's requirements have been done. And so now it is for the EMA to conclude their aspect of it, and then we move to the employer's responsibility and the framework agreement and so on. So that's well on its way, and during construction period, we expect that 1,000 persons will be employed, and the opportunity with 60 to 80 factories in there, and warehouses and distribution centers and so on, we are looking at upwards of 4,500 persons in that industrial estate. So important it is to this southern region. And of course, there are other projects in the south. Minister would have spoken about the extension of the San Fernando Highway to Point Fortin, the San Fernando Waterfront Development Project, the Skinner Park Redevelopment Project, in Maruga, where there are also Petrotrin workers, the Maruga Fishing Port, the Maruga Agro-Processing and Light Industrial Park, in La Brea, the La Brea Dry Docking Facility. And let me just tell you, with regard to that, La Brea Dry Docking Facility is a mammoth opportunity, and so that during the construction of the project, some 3,500 jobs will be created. Those are direct jobs, and there will also be 5,000 indirect jobs as well. And when on completion and operationalized, some 2,700 direct jobs and 13,000 indirect jobs as well. Again, Madam President, significant opportunity there as well. Even also the methanol to DME complex, which I know the last government was involved with, but they never completed the agreement. And when we came into office, we had to go back and negotiate. That's in the Point Lisa Industrial Estate. That too is a significant opportunity for employment, especially for the engineers and technicians and that kind of thing. And I spoke about the other opportunities in terms of the creative sector and but I will not go into too much detail on it as Madam Speaker. And I'm trusting, I will not speak here, Madam President, I'm not going to speak much about the tourism sector, but I want to say that there's the opportunity in San Fernando even for sports tourism as well, with the Brian Lara Stadium and so on. But so that there are a number, the point I'm making is that there are a number of projects that are listed for for South Trinidad, and they in fact represent opportunities for all those persons who have not yet found employment. So concerned we are very concerned, and the necessary, it is important as the economy has turned around, and we are looking towards growth of just under 2%. For 2018, 2019, 2%. There would be there would be greater opportunities as we seek to attract further investment to Trinidad and Tobago. But Madam Speaker, I want to get back into the crux of the debate to say that. The transition has been a good one. Yes, and I've spoken to the question of job losses and so on. The transition has been a good one from the point of view that we have in place the Paria fuel trading and, of course, the Heritage Company as well. I say so because there are key successes to date. A number of management employees have been rehired. Also along with new employees, they are the level of the management structure, and I think almost immediately or in the very near future, all of the other jobs that are available in the new organization structures will be filled. So as we speak, there is there is the hiring of employees to fill the org structures, and I can say that I'm quite certain that suitable employees will be brought back into the organization. And I say suitable because one has to be very careful if you're rejuvenating or reinventing an organization, because something that is very important is that you don't make the same mistakes again. So that the culture of the organization is important. And people who are employed under these new companies must be prepared for hard work and to know that they are acting in the best interest of the nation. Energy business is not small business. Energy business is big business, big money. And therefore, if you're going to do it, if you have another bite at it, it has to be done well. And the culture that you create in the organization matters. We're looking to have a healthy organization. Madam President, I want to go to a point that Senator Teemal made, and I think it's so important. He spoke about Republic Bank and the question of the pension plan which was raised. So just to say that this particular Petrotrin pension plan is a closed plan, so that there are no more contributions being made, so that the performance of the plan will really depend on how its securities perform. And that, so we are concerned about the future for it. But what we've done is we've put in place, we've commissioned an actuarial report. We've commissioned an actuarial report to look into the direction of this pension plan. But as it is, it stands healthy. But it is something that is concerning, that will be of concern to the number of pensioners and those the number of pensioners and retired persons who have retired from Petrotrin. So that remains of significant import to us. Senator Thompson-Ahye, you were very, very passionate, and you spoke about the quality of life and the importance of these kinds of decisions in terms of the effect that it has on families. And we understand. We understand, and don't for a moment think that we were callous in the way we approached this. It is absolutely not so.
5 more minutes.
Thank you. We were at pains, but we had to make a decision. Do we continue the way we were going? And with no end in sight, and with another understanding where we're going with this, remembering as well that they were producing fuel and so on, which by 2020, when Marpol's convention takes effect, nobody in the world was buying the quality of diesel that they were making. And just to get our plant going again would have taken another more than $1 billion. Those were the kinds of things that we had to take into consideration. We are concerned, but I think the board and the cabinet acted judiciously, acted with haste, with dispatch. I would rather say. All of the responsibilities which we took with regard to the former Petrotrin employees, we've done. We've paid $2.4 billion out of former employees. There's $2.4 billion in circulation in the south of Trinidad. Money has been paid. It's somewhere. If it left somewhere, it got to be somewhere. Right? No, and you would laugh at that, Senator Haynes. You would laugh. But the fact is that money is in circulation. It's in banks, so it's in circulation and so on. And people are being careful. But $1.9 billion was paid into their termination packages, all of the outstanding vacation. The back pay was paid. And even the amount owed to the non-permanent workers were paid. And so I think in every which way, we've acted responsibly, and we've done what we had to do. As I said, you know, let me go where I started. When my father took the VSEP, it was because it was a big decision made by some head office. And this is not the first time, because remember, we changed hands many times, UBT, Shell, Texaco, you name it, right? Amoco was in there someplace and so on. But there were big decisions being made in boardrooms abroad, right? And we were affected here. This time, it was a big decision which fell to us as a government, dealing with a state company. That's where it boiled down. This time, wasn't the big people to take it and run. We had to make the right decision. This government had to make the right decision. And I think I'm recognizing all sides to it, the economics, the overall effect on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, the finances with regard to the continuing losses in Petrotrin, the people of San Fernando, the people of Petrotrin. That was our major concern, and this is the reason why all of us inside, on this side, will continue to do whatever we can to ensure that we take care of the people of the Southland, and we ensure that these new companies do in fact work and do what they're supposed to do, which is benefit the country. And that's what this is all about. I want to thank all of you and Madam President for the opportunity to contribute.
Honourable Senators, at this stage we will suspend the sitting and we will return at 5 p.m.